Hi, I'm Jonah, and this is a Learn to Play tutorial for the corn planting song, a traditional Hopi song. Now this is a more intermediate level song, and we thought this would be good after doing some somewhat simpler songs recently. The reason that it's a more intermediate level song is there's some notes in here that many of you may not have played before. There's some cross fingering, and the rhythms are more complex. There's a lot of changing notes on the offbeat. But if you've been playing the native flute for a while and you've been maybe wanting to move into a new area of playing, you've been kind of feeling stuck in on a certain genre, a certain style, or you're just wanting to try some new things, having new notes and new rhythms is a great way to move into new areas of music and to really change your playing style and find new ways of enjoying the native flute. Now I'll be playing this on a flute in the key of A. This is one of our migration flutes. Any flute in the key of A will sound really good with this song, and other keys as well. I found that it sounds a little better to my ear with the higher notes, with the higher tone flutes, but it might also sound sweet to your ear with some lower tone flutes. So now I'll play the song through once, and then I'll go through a little introduction of how to use the tutorial, and then we'll move into the tutorial itself. Now, the easiest way that I find to work through and learn a song is to walk through it phrase by phrase. And a phrase is like the sentence of a story. You put all the sentences together and you build a story. With a song, you put all the phrases together and you build a song. Essentially, each time you pause to take a breath, you've completed a phrase. And because in the music we've added these breath marks, you can easily see that the phrases begin and end at each of these breath marks. I've also noted the number of the phrases using these numbers with lines through them. Phrase 1, 2, and so on. As I walk through each phrase, I'll note anything that's particularly challenging or unusual about the phrase, places to look for, things to work on. And then I'll show you how to play the phrase, and I'll play it at a slow tempo, and then I'll play it again at a faster tempo. At that point, I'd suggest pausing the video and working through the phrase until you have the fingering and the rhythm pretty well down at that slower tempo. Once you get to the end of the song, I'd suggest going back to the beginning and working through it again. And each time you do that, you'll memorize the fingerings and the rhythm a little bit more, and you'll be able to play through it a little more fluidly each time. And as you do that, you can slowly bring it up to tempo. These are the notes in this song that some of you might not have played before. So when you come upon these notes, take some time with them, teach your fingers the dexterity of how to catch the notes. I'll also talk more about these notes as they come up within each phrase. If you're not used to reading sheet music, I may use terms that you're not familiar with when talking about the sheet music. So here's a list of the common shapes of the notes, the names for them, and how long each is held for with relation to a beat. This is the first phrase of the corn planting song, and these are the notes that some of you may not have played before. As far as the fingering goes, in this phrase, the most challenging part is when you're doing these cross fingerings, going from this note to this note, and this note to this note, and then again, this note to this note. Now, if you're not familiar with cross fingering is when you're opening one hole and closing another hole simultaneously. For instance, going from this note to this note, you're opening this hole while simultaneously closing these holes. And then again, going from this note to this note, you're doing the opposite. If you're new to these cross fingerings, I would suggest practicing them without playing the song. Just go back and forth from one note to the other a number of times till you feel comfortable with making that transition. And then go ahead and move into the song and add the rhythm of the song to those notes as well. Also going from this note to this note where all the fingers are open and back to this note can be challenging, mostly because it's hard to know sometimes how to hold the flute with all the fingers open. The most stable way that I've found to do this is to hold the flute with both my thumbs and both my pinkies, and holding it against my mouth as I'm playing, I can open up all the holes and it's relatively stable, just like it's shown here. Depending on how you learn to hold the flute, your pinky may or may not already be resting on the flute. If it is, the transition looks like this. If it's not, then the transition looks like this, and you'll have to get used to putting your pinky down while you make this transition. Now, with respect to the rhythm of the song uses a lot of dotted quarter notes. And what that does is it makes it so there's a lot of changes on offbeats. And what the offbeat is it's the middle of the onbeats. So the onbeats would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So those are all your onbeats. And to hear the offbeats, we add the word and in. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And so a dotted quarter note, because it gets 1.5 beats, you're always going to be changing notes on the offbeat. And the song also uses a lot of eighth notes and 16th notes, and an eighth note gets a half a beat. So again, you're going to be changing notes on the offbeat because it's only half the beat. And then 16th notes means there's 2 notes compressed into a half a beat. So again, you'll be changing notes on the offbeat. So a dotted quarter note gets 1.5 beats, an eighth note gets a half a beat, and a 16th note gets a quarter of a beat. So the song starts here with a dotted quarter note, goes to an eighth note, another dotted quarter note, 2 16th notes moving into a number of quarter notes. So this rhythm in the beginning is a more complex rhythm than what a lot of beginning level songs would use. Now, one thing that's really helpful when learning a new rhythm is to verbally speak the rhythm out. In order to do that, we need to be able to partition the beats according to how many beats each of these notes gets. So a quarter note gets 1 beat, so we'd partition the rhythm out as 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, within that same structure of 1, 2, 3, 4, for eighth notes, we would partition it out using and as well. So we would say 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now a 16th note gets a quarter of a beat, so we partition it out using 1 E and a. So it would sound like this: 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. So that's how we can partition the rhythm out to represent these different types of notes. So with that said, this is what the beginning rhythm would sound like: 1 and 2 and a 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, 1 and 2 and a 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you might have noticed that in this first measure, from here to here, when I was counting it, I only counted out 2 beats, where in the second measure, from here to here, I counted 4 beats. And that's because in sheet music, there's a convention that allows the first measure of the song to have less beats in it than all the subsequent measures. And that's called an anacrusis, or a pickup measure. In this particular sheet of music, every measure, meaning between these bars, like this bar and this bar, or this bar and this bar, is supposed to have 4 beats in it. But because the beginning measure is an anacrusis, or a pickup, it's allowed to only have 2 beats in it. Now, the one last thing to note about this phrase is this slur right here. And a slur means that you move from one note to the next without starting and stopping the air with your tongue, which is called tonguing. So you're not tonguing the notes, you're slurring the notes. You're just moving from one to the next. And here's what this phrase sounds like. The second phrase is very similar to the first phrase, but it does have some variation in both its rhythm and its notation. The main differences in the rhythm are that here we don't have the slur like we do here in the first phrase. Now again, we have cross fingerings going from here to here, and here to here, and then again here to here. Phrase 3 is a simple phrase that uses these long drawn-out notes in order to create a feeling of completion of this first half of the song. Now we have this slur running over the whole phrase, and so that means that you're going to slur between these different notes. And underneath this slur, we have this tie, and what this tie is doing is it's combining these 2 notes together. We have a half note here that gets 2 beats, another half note here that gets 2 beats, and so when we put them together, all in all, this one note will get 4 beats, and that's represented here in the tablature as well. The fourth phrase begins the second half of the song, and this half of the song has a different rhythmic feel to it than the first half of the song. Now we still have this one dotted quarter note and then these 2 16th notes, and we saw this rhythm in the first half of the song, but after we move through that, we don't see any more dotted quarter notes. What we do see is this rhythm here. And this rhythm here has a different feel to it than the beginning half of the song. And what I found most challenging here was that I kept wanting to hold this quarter note here for 1.5 beats because I was so used to playing that throughout the beginning half of the song, and even in the beginning of this phrase where this is a dotted quarter note here to these 16th notes. So I kept wanting to hold this quarter note for 1.5 beats. And so it took me a little bit to cut it off short, and it's not short, it just cut it off at 1 beat and then move into these 8th notes. And so what I find in general with all these types of rhythms is as you'll work through them technically first, and then as you start to get the hang of it, you can start getting a feel for it. The technical part will start merging into what the actual rhythm feels like as you're playing it, and then the two work together to start playing it smoothly. And what this rhythm sounds like is this: 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and. So it has a really different feel to it than the first half of the song, the offbeats on the first half of the song. So again, it sounds like this. 1, 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and. We're playing through the downbeat on the fourth beat, and then we're hitting that offbeat of that measure before we move into the onbeat of the next measure. So again, it sounds like this. 1, 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and. As far as the notes go, these are the notes that may be new to some of you. And we again have this same cross fingering that we saw in the first half of the song, going from this note to this note. You can really feel it. Once you kind of find it, you can really feel it. But it's a shift from that first part, which is a remnant of the first half of the song, the feel of the first half of the song, to a new feel to it. In phrase 5, we again see this cross-fingering of notes that may be new to some of you. And hopefully by this time in the song, this cross-fingering is becoming a little easier. Your hands are getting the dexterity of it, and it's becoming a little more fluid. Now, as far as the rhythm goes, this first half of the rhythm, we have these two changes here, from this note to this note, and this note to this note on the offbeat. And then the second half of the phrase is all on the onbeat. Now I'll count this rhythm out, but I'm going to start here because it's the beginning of the measure. It's the number one beat of this measure, and it makes it a little easier to count. So here we go. 1, 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and. Again. 1, 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and. One more time. 1, 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and. So by counting it like this a number of times like I just did, in the beginning you're kind of moving through it more technically, but then if you just keep doing it over and over, once you get the technical part of it, as you repeat it again and again, you start moving into the feel of it, and it becomes more of a feeling, and then the two can kind of merge together so that you can start playing through the phrases smoothly.